You can lead a company, manage a team, and make high stakes decisions every day, but one phone call about your aging parent can completely change your world. I know because I lived it. In the years leading up to my mom's passing, I found myself balancing executive leadership responsibilities, business demands, family obligations, and the realities of caring for an aging parent. As the oldest child and only daughter, much of that caregiving responsibility fell to me. What made it even harder, though, was that my relationship with my mother was complicated. I often felt trapped between what I believed was necessary to protect her well being and carrying the guilt, criticism, and pressure that comes with those decisions. What surprised me the most was this: I was shocked by how quickly caregiving could overwhelm my confidence, my leadership, and my emotional resilience. Because caring for an aging parent isn't just about caregiving, it's about family history, identity, obligation, boundaries, and making difficult decisions when there's just no perfect option. Behind every employee showing up to work, leader building and deploying a strategy, and there might be someone quietly carrying this burden right now. Today's conversation matters because organizations may not realize it's happening. Pew Research did a study that people in their 40s are likely part of a group known as the sandwich generation. In fact, more than half of Americans in their 40s are simultaneously supporting an aging parent and their own children, often while managing demanding careers and leadership responsibilities. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fitness Friday. This is where we explore mental, emotional, physical, and organizational factors that influence how we perform under pressure. And today I'm joined by Jamie Roberts. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Hello.
I'm so excited to have you as part of our show today. So, I want to tell you a little bit about Jamie. Jamie has spent more than 2 decades working across the aging services industry. She served as an administrator, executive director of a $58 million continuing care retirement community, and now she's CEO of the Help Project and a leader in aging services advocacy and policy. Her experience spans healthcare operations, elder care policy, workforce development, family caregiving support, and organizational consulting. She understands the aging journey from every perspective: clinical, financial, legal, operational, and it's also deeply personal. Thank you so much. I know we're going to have a great conversation, Jamie. But before we get started, I want to share my story because this conversation is really meaningful to me. In the years leading up to my mom's passing in early 2024, I found myself balancing my executive responsibilities with the complex demands of caring for an aging parent. So I felt like most of that caregiving responsibility fell to me. What made it even more difficult was that my relationship with my mom was complicated even before she became really sick. As her health declined even further and her day to day needs increased, I found myself making very difficult care and boundary decisions to protect her health and safety. Many of those decisions I felt were met with resistance, anger. I felt trapped in a never ending cycle of if I stepped in, I felt like I was being criticized. If I stepped back against my better judgment, I would feel guilty when things went wrong. When I talked about it, well meaning people would say things like, well, she's your mom. I know people were trying to be supportive, but all I heard was pressure. I felt pressure to do more, sacrifice more, contribute more financially. I had to set aside my own feelings of exhaustion, grief, frustration, and all the emotional baggage that comes with it. I felt like it was my responsibility to override all of my own emotions. What I learned was caring for an aging parent is complicated. It's more than just managing the daily tasks of living. It brings up really complicated family dynamics. As I thought about that, I wanted to do this episode because if I'm feeling that, I'm certain that there are other people out there that are feeling the same. You're faced with extremely difficult decisions when there are no perfect options. I'm also a high functioning executive who leads teams. I made really high stakes decisions under tremendous pressure and business decisions. So I was surprised when it came to my mom how quickly decisions could overwhelm my confidence and my emotional resilience. I would just start bursting into tears, and that's just not me. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with Jamie. There's probably a person that might be struggling with the same things that I was dealing with, carrying that caregiving burden. What I want most out of this discussion is that organizations to recognize it affects your most high performing leaders and individuals and how they think, lead, and make decisions for the organization. This first question, Jamie, for me is deeply personal. I shared in my story there. During my mother's final years, I was making significant decisions. But when it came to caring for my mother, I was at a loss. I felt less clarity than I did in my own professional career. What made it challenging is I was doing it in my mom's best interest, but I was being met with resistance, criticism, anger at everything that I was doing. So that complicated feeling of trying to do the best that I could with the information that I had at the time, but then feeling that pressure and that judgment. What is it about the parent child dynamic that makes even a highly capable leader feel vulnerable? And why do so many caregivers struggle with guilt, especially when the relationship with that parent is very complicated?
Yeah, well, first of all, Lisa, thank you for having me and for being vulnerable and having this conversation at all so openly. I think it takes a lot of courage. So I just want to applaud you for that and sharing your story with other people because you are absolutely not alone in this. And I think the why behind this piece of it, I mean, I am not a clinician, so I'm not providing therapy. My perspective on this is that every other relationship in your life, you have the ability to set boundaries on and it holds, right? But because they're the ones you're choosing to be in. But with a parent, the boundaries themselves, it's sort of a new battleground, particularly when they start aging and that relationship shifts from how it was before. Or maybe not shifting because maybe you were still acting as the primary caregiver growing up too, right? I mean, there was
Mhm.
some of that was happening, but every decision reopens the history of never having to have a decision there itself, right? I mean, so there's nothing there was always something else there. And so high performers, particularly in somebody in your case, right? You're wired. The reason why high performers kind of feel this more sometimes is that you're wired of always being judged on outcomes and you're in control
Yeah.
of something, right? Like you're
Yeah.
in positions of always being judged. And so you're constantly thinking 10 steps ahead. How do I get this done? How do I get it done better? And what are they going to say about however I did it, right? And now when you have a parent that maybe you had a complicated relationship with, I think you feel that piece of it even more because you're wired to expect a negative response. Sometimes, my sister and I joke around about sometimes conversations we have with our mom, and I'm like, "Oh, did you get a compliment today?" Right?
Mhm.
That was more not the compliment. I've been wired to look at things like, what would be the other negative thing somebody would say? And so leaders in this position, in a position that you held and the people that you help, right? They're used to being looked at that way, and so they're always
Mhm.
anticipating that. And so caregiving for a parent, who resents the care and there's no controllable outcome, and you've done everything right, but you're gonna still be cast as the villain. That's
Yeah.
kind of the end of the story, right? So, that's why somebody who's competent at work, it doesn't transfer to personal caregiving. It just doesn't. Guilt, it isn't proof that you're doing something wrong. It's really the tax that you're giving yourself for protecting somebody who you rather didn't have to. Like, you really wish you didn't have to do that to begin with.
Uh-huh.
So I think the first thing for folks when you're talking about this or you come to the realization that like, look, I have a complicated relationship with my parents. And I think there is, and we talked about this sort of on one of our other conversations, but the Mel Robbins books, Let Them,
Yeah.
There are really incredible nuggets in there, more than nuggets, it's the title of the book. But really, when you're preparing to make decisions for your parent and you are anticipating all the things that are going to happen by making that decision, right? You have that anticipatory anxiety of like, I now have to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm dreading it. And it might not even be that big of a decision, but just that little decision of all of the other things that come after it feel it's overwhelming.
Mm.
As I'm gonna have to deal with the 75 phone calls or being called X, Y, and Z, or all of the other people that are coming in. I'm gonna have to retell this whole story. I mean, just the idea of having to do it, there's number 1, right? But when you prepare for decisions, for somebody that you're resenting to have to do it for, frankly, is separate the idea of that I am protecting their safety from I'm managing their approval for you to act, right? So just shifting that kind of perspective, like,
Yeah,
I'm doing this because I need to keep them safe as opposed to this is nothing to do about, their approval anymore. I mean, that ship has
yeah,
sailed. So because that's what's in your control of how you think about it, right? It's that let them theory. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, they're going to think the thing. If my position of doing this is from the right place of wanting to protect them and make sure that they're safe, that's the only place that I can come to. Because I don't do it, then it's not gonna get done. So which can also be the outcome. You can also wipe your hands of it and say, "Not my circus, not my monkey," right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But I would also encourage folks, if you're in that moment, you also don't have to be the bad guy. Bring in partners, bring in the care team, and when we talk about aging parents in general or aging loved ones, you really don't wanna be a solo, caregiver. You wanna bring in a team, and so whether that's doctors, a care manager, an attorney, clergy, and help them help you with those decisions, right? Driving, one of the bigger decisions to make, right? It's safe for you to drive. Have the doctor help you with that, right? They're not going to like like you don't have to be the ones that's constantly giving that information. And so but that only happens when you've spent the time kind of building that care team around you, giving yourself a protective shell so that your relationship doesn't have to absorb 100% of the blowback, right?
uh,
That's one strategy. And also write your reasoning down before you decide what you're going to do. So when the guilt shows back up later, which it always shows back up because it'll come, you can check it against your logic and that will help you find a center again about what you're doing. So
mhm. Yeah, I think those 2 things are really important and something that at first I tried to manage everything on my own, and I realized it was too overwhelming, and actually, I started feeling my body breaking down, so I was carrying so much stress and tension in my body, I was having physical reactions to the amount of cognitive load. I didn't think it was affecting me, so, I could go to sleep and I'd wake up the next morning, for example, and I knew I had been grinding my teeth all night long because I was just carrying that tension. And so I started to your point, I started saying, "Okay, I can't do it all, and I'm going to need a support team to help me with all these different tasks." So I started leaning on my siblings, on my spouse. I did have a good care team, so I was having conversations with them, so bringing them into the conversation. But I think the second thing is even though I was doing all of that, just so that there were more people aware of what was happening, I was still getting the pushback. And so I think your second point, I think, was really a fantastic point, which is let them because you're not gonna be able to control that outcome. Even though you think you're doing the right thing, no matter whether you do one thing or another, the individual is just gonna resent whatever it is, whatever you're doing, and to check your logic to say, based on the information that I had at the time, was that the best decision that I could make? And being able to check yourself and say, "Yes, that was the best decision. They're gonna do whatever they're going to do, and you don't have any control." And when I personally did that and let go of that feeling of trying to control the outcome, and I let go of that they're gonna do whatever they're going to do, and I don't have any control, actually, my body just felt that release of tension, and I stopped having the jaw pain, the neck pain, the shoulder pain, and everything else.
for sure. I mean, caregiving alone, I mean, caregivers are 80% more likely to have health conditions, right, that show up much faster and complicate their life much more than they ever expected. And
Yeah,
so and it is things like you weren't at the age to start having all of these other issues, but the stress
exactly.
of the caregiving showed up. It doesn't go away. The emotional stress will present itself. Emotional exhaustion of doing it, the mental exhaustion, all of those things, like, it does. It will take a toll on you, and if you aren't aware of it, your body will tell you, "Well, if you're not gonna do it, then we're gonna show you how it has to get done." I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of incredible when you see that, and so for you to recognize that and to say, "I need help," is powerful. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't until it's it's too late, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And and
Which is,
deep
by the way, that was incredibly hard for me to do because I'm not wired to ask for help from anybody. That's
course not. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
not wired to do that. So, is there anything that people can do to emotionally prepared for these decisions that they have to make, even though the person is going to resent them?
You know, uh, I feel like that might be the $64,000 question, but I think that question falls strictly on the idea of, are you the person who's going to have the negative outcome from your aging parent? What are you in control of? And then what parts in your own mind can you shift to,
Mhm.
to not carry that with you? And I think there's a large mind strategy that you have to work on that piece, which uh, I think a lot of high functioning folks do that in the workplace all the time. But again, there's nothing logical about your relationship with your parent. I mean, the logical things or the task things are there, and maybe or maybe not you're good at those things. But when you layer on this other piece of it, a lot of people, they're frozen. I mean, they're
Yeah,
paralyzed to
yeah.
think of what to do. And so I think the first thing is awareness. Like, you need to be aware of that relationship. And when the creep begins, like the caregiving creep begins, that like really get yourself in, talk to somebody to talk to, you got to get that stuff out. And then you have to get your strategies in place in terms of how you're going to adjust your thinking to manage those things, because the guarantee you are going to have is you're going to have that frustrating experience. You're going to be disappointed, you're going to get blamed, you're going to have all of those things. So knowing like those things are going to happen. So now I need to arm myself with the strategies and the solutions uh, to manage it,
Mm,
right? But if you don't have awareness to it at any point, you're just going to be drowning in
yeah.
the
I
trauma.
know I spent a lot of mental energy on the rational side of my brain saying, "These are the right things to do," but then I would get hijacked for the feeling, "This makes no sense. Why would she do that? Why would she do this? Why would that happen?" I would have all of those rational, logical sequencing of activities, and then I would be hijacked by, "That just makes no sense. Why? Why did
Yeah.
that happen? It makes no sense."
And you do have to do some mind games with yourself. You have to like prepare yourself knowing that in advance. Like, I am going to get this pushback. But then again, I think if you go in and you're preparing to make this decision and you know they're going to resent you, even if you're giving them their kidney. I mean, that's the other, it is like you could be literally giving them the most beautiful gift of whatever, and they're still going to resent you. I mean, that's the hard part. So that's when you have to reframe it and say, I am doing this for the safety and protection for this person, and I am not doing this to manage how they're gonna think of me afterwards. Because
Right.
being able to just reframe it that way is gonna be really helpful. But on the flip side of that, then you need to have your support team that you can go to after the fact while you're managing the situation, which high functioning women do all day long. They're gonna manage it. But when you need to crumble, you need to have a place to crumble and kind of
Mm.
have that moment too. Because what I don't want this to be is, I'm not saying is like, don't suppress it. Like, I'm gonna tell myself it's gonna be fine even though it's not gonna be fine, sort of
Well,
thing.
I can tell you from personal experience that doesn't work. It doesn't work because your body will revolt and tell you, that's not gonna work here."
You're joking, right? You're playing around. We
Yes.
see you, right? When somebody has some anxiety, right? And they're learning like that exposure therapy, but then and they solve the one exposure, but then they move to the next one, right? The new
Mhm.
anxiety to soothe themselves. That's where your health comes in, right? If you keep on thinking you're just gonna put a band-aid over it and hustle through it or muscle through it, or get through it. There's something very unique about
Yeah,
this
this is
experience.
not a push through type of activity. It just won't work.
It won't. And so if you've already done the mental mind blocking to get you to this high performing executive level that you're at, like that's why you're there.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
I don't know because I don't know if there's studies on this, but there are a tremendous amount of high performing women that are high performing because of the roles that they played in their childhood, right? Or because of the relationships that they've had. Like it made them realize like I just have to get this stuff done.
yeah,
And so those strategies to get you through those parts of your life worked well for you, but they will not work well for you in this particular situation.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so one thing that I remember vividly was people around me not realizing what was happening because I was very private about it. I didn't share what was happening with my mother's situation. Despite this, or maybe because of it, I still showed up. I think there was a little bit of I showed up and I had a way to escape what was happening in my personal life with that caregiving responsibility. And I showed up at work, I led, delivered results. And most people didn't even realize of that emotional burden that I was carrying or that stress that I was carrying behind the scenes. I wanted to have this conversation with you because it really made me wonder how many employees are doing the exact same thing that I was doing. How many and then the second question is how many companies are starting to realize that their employee population is quietly managing an aging parent crisis? It might not even be an aging parent. Maybe it's caring for a spouse or sibling or maybe one of your family members. And what does it actually cost an organization of terms of productivity, retention, engagement, leadership development, and burnout? Why are employees so reluctant? I kept it private myself. And why are we reluctant to share what's happening with our employers?
You know, I love this question, but for so many reasons. But I think women, because I mean, I think women specifically don't want to talk about it. Well, I'll say maybe our generation and older of women don't want to talk about it at work. I don't know. The younger generation's a little bit different, but I think it's much like I don't want to tell them I'm pregnant either. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get passed up for their promotion. I don't want people to think that I can't handle it. So I'm not going to talk about this thing at work because I don't want anyone to know. Number one. Number two is if there's any type of brain change that's also happening or some kind of like, neurodivergence that are occurring too, they're also embarrassed by it. A lot of folks are just embarrassed by it. They think bad aging is also associated with like their own personal genes and it's a reflection of them. It's a very
Mm.
strange projection that occurs and they just don't want to think about it either. That's them having to come to terms with their own mortality. So I think that piece of not talking about it exists particularly with women. I think with men, I think it's harder for them because caregiving in general, that role is also a unique role and that's why I think it's probably not popping up. But I do think at the water cooler, right, there are these conversations with your work bestie that you're talking to about the
Mm-hmm.
problem and or the person next to the cubicle or you hear the little thing here and there. So it's absolutely there. I mean, 53% of what you would call the sandwich generation, people who are caring for their children and their adult parents, that's 53% of that generation is dealing with it right now.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
over half of somebody's employment team, if they're in that between a Gen X to boomer range, like 53% of those folks are guaranteed to be dealing with it in some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think because companies are feeling this, but they don't have a name for it yet. Like, what do you call it, right? They see things like, because the other thing about caregiving and what makes this unique more than any other life experience in anyone's life is that it's a creep, right? So it creeps in. It doesn't just show up like a baby or
Yeah.
something like that. It's
Yeah.
a
It's not something where you're pregnant, you have the baby, you take parental leave because it's visible, right? You see that somebody is expecting and then they're going to go out on maternity or paternity leave and come back.
Right. So it shows up in the workplace as retention dips or mid-career stall outs or disengagement. Uh, People love the word burnout, which is also they are burnt out, but for reasons that have nothing to do with work, probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Right.
it's a culture problem within the organization. Instead of them realizing, because they've never asked the question, right? Like they're literally managing a second full-time job, and and
Yeah,
that cost of that will show up in 3 places, right? Replacement cost for that experienced talent, the leadership pipeline because of the folks that have been around for a while, right? That's where, people decline and the opportunities, they have nothing left to give, even though they're probably the right person to take on the next thing. And that quiet absenteeism or what people call silent quitting, that sort of
quiet quitting. Yeah.
yeah, that's where you're seeing this show up, but because we don't have an HR bucket or data for it, because 'cause we're not asking about it, we put it in one of these other 3 buckets. So, they don't disclose it because they think it's a liability issue, probably. I mean,
Mhm,
that it's
mhm.
like, we don't
Yeah, I know. I guess for me, the complication was like, I can handle it. I've handled so many things in my work life, and I don't want to show that vulnerability that this is an aspect of my performance because I felt it was like some aspect of performance that I didn't have a handle on. And so I didn't want to share what was happening to me because I didn't want to be perceived like I don't have my
you're
stuff
right,
together.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's also why people, like, I mean, there's just certain things that you just don't want your employer to know because of whatever they'll take that information as a data point, right? They're gonna be like, "Oh," just like you don't want them to know how you manage your bank account either, you know? I mean, those are things you certainly don't want them to know, right? I mean, so it kind of falls within that same category, and so what happens with companies and the companies that are recognizing this, the ones who are recognizing it are recognizing because 'cause they're going through it, right? And they're thinking, "Oh my gosh." And I would say leaders like you and the women that you work with, they're looking for resources, right, for themselves. And that's where Help Project came in was, I have these really high functioning folks calling me and saying, "Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, I'm an executive dealing with this. Like, is this it?" And
Yeah.
when you say to them, "Well, if you're dealing with this and you have 1,000 employees, how do you think they're dealing with it? And you
Mhm.
have resources and support, right? Or the ability to pay for help or whatever the expectation that people think that you have. If you're dealing with it, everyone else in your same situation, they're also dealing with it." And that reflection back to a lot of organizations that ask the question, they're like, "You're right. We don't, and we don't measure this. How do we do it? What do we do?" Right?
Mhm.
And I will say it's not another yoga app, right? It's not that. People need care coordination support. They need to know. I walk through 5 areas that every organization, if you're dealing with employees, should know. I mean, there's really some simple things that organizations can do today to help their employees, understand that this is an issue and that they see you and they recognize you, and that solution alone is really helpful.
Yeah, I would agree with you because I didn't need a meditation app or a yoga app or some sort of mindfulness activity. I personally needed more the practical things because it's not easy to find when you're trying to manage the medical expenses, all the caregiving paperwork, all the Medicare, Medicaid, all the different types of paperwork, plus managing the person, plus making sure that the hospital visits and all that, and the doctor's visits. There's just practical things that I needed that I had to search. Google was my best friend, trying to find what is the best way to navigate all these different situations. If I'm a leader and I'm managing people or an HR professional, are there any particular signs or warning signs that you could pay attention to when you're seeing your valuable employees start to something's going on? I
Yeah,
can't put my finger on it, but
yeah.
what is it?
Well, someone who used to raise their hand stopped raising their hand. I mean, maybe they got quiet during meetings. I mean, they're very subtle signs, right? They've maybe left the meeting 3 minutes before it actually ended, right? You can just, if you're watching your folks, you can tell that person who just left, right? Like they're not there.
Yeah, they
You
checked out. Yeah.
you can see that they're physically there, but they're not there. The last minute PTO requests that seem unusual for their behaviors and their patterns, right? This one's really important. I would say more camera off time than on time if they're virtually working, right?
I had to do some of that because there'd be a phone call where I was trying to keep my mom, say, in a facility if she'd left the hospital and gone to a facility. And then they're calling me and telling me, your mom wants to leave. And I'm I'm on the phone begging and crying and, like, have to come back to a meeting where I'm supposed to be on and present. My eyes are puffy, my face is puffy from just having this emotional outburst right before the conversation, so
Yeah.
totally can relate to that.
Yeah, and those are really the signs, and so I would say 2 things. I also think the I'm fine. If somebody says to you, and I think this is where you could do a train the trainer with your HR folks and any leader that has people, working with them on a team is not asking like, "Hey, you okay?" Because 'Cause they're gonna say fine, and the fine doesn't
Mhm,
match the outcome, right? But really just saying, is everything okay with your parents? Like, are I mean, like, naming the thing, like, just saying the thing is really helpful because then you just know that, like, okay, it's here. It's like, I'm not hiding the baby anymore. The shirt is
mhm,
it
yeah,
is now a maternity top. But being able to ask very specific laser focused questions on the particular thing about aging parents and caregiving helps people name it and recognize it. And so if you're doing that from a lens of leadership, support, and culture, you're more likely to see the signs. And so I think, and because caregiving creeps, right? And because I've used this kind of terminology before, it is much like boiling a frog, which is not an
oh, yeah,
ideal, I mean, people people have been caregiving for their parents probably 10 years before they'd like to admit that it ever started, right?
mhm,
And so by the time that it's gotten to the point like where it got with your mom, right? You were drowning already. I mean, it was already to a point of it is SOS please, right? So, but there are these little micro movements that are happening in your employees career that if you're aware and checking in with them and actually know them and that is your culture. And I think a lot of
mm,
companies that is their culture. And if you know your employees, these are the things that are really easy to track and see. And you can check in and say, "Hey, cuz here's the thing, your aging parent and you know this from experience Lisa, right? It's not like you solve this one thing and you go back to now okay, now the problem's solved. Phew, like I'm good."
right,
I mean,
right.
no,
And you
you're
actually may think you have solved the problem for that moment in time, then it opens back up and it's actually not solved. It's whack-a-mole. I feel like you've solved one problem, something else pops up. You solve that one, the first one pops up, or 3 more pop up.
I love that you just said whack-a-mole, that's the perfect description. I mean, I think that's where companies are in a powerful position today that they didn't know about, and why would they? Because we've never had people living this long before, right? You've never had a sandwich generation. I mean, people are having babies older. I mean, that stretch between when you have children and when your parents start aging is a lot shorter
Mhm,
than it ever was before, and it's only going to continue, right? And so people don't know about this. So I think companies that are mindful of it and interested are going to be the ones who are really going to match that culture curve that they'll win, if you will,
mhm,
because there are ways for them to address this, but it's also doing it 10 years before the crisis hits. So reminding them to get the power of attorney paperworks, have those supports in there because it's going to pay off in the organization when some of the really basic stuff is done 10 years prior, right? So if
yeah.
organizations take
I
that on,
100% agree with that.
you're going to
Which is
see,
just providing the resources to your employees. These things are available to you, so through employee resource groups, or we have these resources to help you navigate taking care of those issues or those things early. Power of attorney. And I was doing that later when my mom was really in a bad place. And
you
so it
don't want
was
to do
even
it
more complicated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna do that conversation when it's just an uncomfortable conversation,
Yeah.
not an impossible conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, organizations, companies who recognize that can benefit society in a tremendous way. That is actually helping people in a way that you might not get that immediate return on that investment, but society is, because that piece alone of just getting the paperwork done is tremendous.
Hmm.
So there are things that I think organizations should be doing with all levels within their organization that could help put us back onto a road of maybe
Yeah.
some type of
And I think
normalcy.
maybe just talking about it, where people are having conversations and talking more openly about it so that it becomes less of a quiet management of responsibility, but it becomes more open and acceptable to have conversations about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, right? You have HR jail. You don't wanna go to HR jail, right? You don't wanna say the wrong questions. I mean, is that an FMLA question? Is it like, am I going to get in
Right.
trouble? Is that an EEOC issue? Like, what, you don't want to go into, HR jail, but there are ways for organizations to understand the plight of their employees a little bit better. And if
Mhm.
productivity is part of what they're trying to accomplish, then recognizing what is impacting that productivity, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so you asked me a question about care consulting, and when you found it, it just didn't do that work for you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, as I was navigating all this and I got towards the end where I was having to get all the paperwork and the medical power of attorney and all the rest of that, I brought in a care consultant to help me have the conversations with my mom. And so I was on a phone call with her and I was sharing some of my frustrations. This doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't she do this? Why wouldn't she do that? I'm just trying to take care of her. And the person asked me just this straight up point blank question. What would it look like if you just didn't do those things? And it was one of those moments in time where my brain just completely went, what? And I was flabbergasted. It hit me because I felt like I had been conditioned to, I had it all together and I had to do everything myself. And I didn't even realize that that was an option that I could say, I'm going to disengage and not do any of these things
Yeah.
for my mom. So I felt like she'd given me life and it was my duty and responsibility to care for her. And because I had this complicated relationship with my mom, and then I think earlier you hit the nail on the head. I'd been caring for my mom way before she got really, really sick because I had a lot of responsibilities. I felt it was my duty and my responsibility. And I didn't even think about that I had permission to step back and not do as much as I was doing. So, what does it take for somebody to move from carrying everything themselves and asking for help and accepting support? So, not only just accepting it, but, you know, reaching out and saying, "Hey, I need help," because I found that very difficult. I rationalize ways of, "Oh, they're really busy," or, "Oh, it's my responsibility." So, I always felt when you said this earlier, somebody would ask me, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." And I had a really difficult time asking or accepting help.
Yeah. So I think the help piece of it, right, is you waited until you were the boiled frog, right? Until you were literally drowning. I mean, that's when most people ask for help. For somebody who does it, I like going to the dentist. I'm one of those very weird people, but my partner hates the dentist and he has like 4 root canals, right? He will pay whatever he needs to pay at the dentist to get that pain gone when he's in the dentist chair.
Nobody's in pain.
Right. But the work that you need to be doing to avoid that pain, people don't like to do that work, right? It's the same thing of, now I'm living with diabetes when I could have just chose a healthier lifestyle. But like now that I'm
Mm.
at this critical moment, I have to do I'm in pain. Like I'll hire the fitness coach, I'll bring the chef in, I'll do all of the things. So, because people have a hard time recognizing when the pain starts, and because we don't talk about this in any real organization, we don't talk about caregiving for your parents or your loved ones with any real passion until it's too late, right? Uh, so, I think just having conversations about it is really important. But I think because we don't, and because we don't have good language around it, and because there's a lot that's just tied up in it, and it's also uncomfortable, people don't like to talk about it because they don't want to think about it for themselves.
Mm,
When
mhm.
I do, any training, I always add in dementia, even if it's not even an issue, because it's what every single person is most worried about, is getting dementia. And so when they're looking at somebody aging, the reason why people don't go work and hang out with older adults is they don't want it. They reject it. They don't wanna age. We have a multi-billion-dollar wellness industry. We don't even put a quarter of that into aging. We don't wanna see it, we don't wanna talk about it, it's the ugly brown table that's
Mhm.
sitting there, and all we do, the majority of us, is spend our entire lives trying to not look at it, right? And so, that piece of it alone is why I think asking for help for it is, number 1, hard. The other piece is some of that is personality, right? Like, the high performer has a hard time asking for help. They also have a really hard time receiving the help. So even
Mhm.
when you ask for it, receiving the help is also really difficult, and that happens for 2 reasons, I think. if you love your parent and you had a good, not complicated relationship with your parent, nobody's ever going to care for them the way that you want them to be cared for. So whatever they do never is going to seem accurate, right? And on the other side, if you have a complicated relationship with your parent, and let's just say the person helping you with it, your parent is now accepting the help and being this lovely person to this person who was never that way to you, even though you're grateful that you have all those things, but you also are a little bit resentful about it. And you're like, well, then why is it so hard for me? And so there's this whole other kind of conversation that happens too. So I think those two reasons, and I'm not trying to put people in buckets.
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Yeah,
it's
but those are good
those are
reasons.
those are 2 things that I've seen, and, like, the other thing is that caregiving actually physically and emotionally and financially, there's nothing easy about it. Like like
Mhm,
like, it's not there isn't a moment where you're like, I mean, some people do it for careers, I mean, they're caregivers because they that's what they wanna do, but it's hard work. I mean, it's rewarding in the sense that they know that they're helping somebody else, but it's physically hard work, it's emotionally hard work, and it can be financially hard work, right? And it's not something a lot of people look forward to doing, you
mhm,
know? And and so those all of those things create kind of the perfect storm of this moment when you have somebody when you need help, like accepting it is hard, but also finding it is hard, and then trying to understand a very complicated system, which is not all connected and doesn't always make sense. It's all ripe for problems of that, right? And then the emotional piece of it, which is why we're kind of here. I mean, this emotional piece, if there's a trust issue, if you have a complicated parent relationship, you also probably have a trust issue, right? Like there's probably a level of not feeling supported, not sure when the other shoe is going to drop, you're walking on eggshells, like all of the things, right? And so you're probably do this in your life in general, you probably question people a little bit differently. Like, do they really mean that? Do I really trust this person? It's probably a little bit harder for you to say, yes, give me the sheet. I'll sign my life away to you because you're going to help me.
mhm,
So there's a trust issue there too, right? And there's the consumer protection piece. I mean, there's all of those things that come into it. So it's not easy. I mean, none of this is easy. There is not an easy button that exists for any of this work. But what does exist is that you have to be able to name it and say it and like help people find access to real solutions for them.
mhm, mhm,
And I'll just say one other thing about that because I think when people call and they need help, some of them really just want you to take the entire problem and deal with it and run with it, and they never want to think about it again. Really, that's what they want. I've shared I'm in the middle of starting a remodel. I don't want to do any of this. Right now,
mhm, right,
I can call somebody and say, I don't even know how to begin packing my house. And somebody will come in and pack my house and I don't have to deal with it. And it's really done. It's taken care of, right? And like, phew. Now the only thing, like now I have to unpack it, fine. And I can find somebody to also do that. But everything might not go exactly where I want it to go because I didn't
mhm,
do all of the unpacking, right? But there's somebody that can solve that problem for me. But with aging parents, you can find somebody to maybe go do all of those things. But you can't pay somebody to care. You can't pay
yeah,
somebody to love and you can't pay somebody to take away the relationship that you may or may not have had with your parent. Like, that still is there for you to deal with.
yeah. The emotional, because those are just activities and tasks, right? So the emotion is still there, whether you pay somebody to go file the paperwork, making sure the shopping list is done, the house is cleaned, all those things, those are just tasks, but they don't have the emotional baggage of the years of the relationship dynamic.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes when they go for support, they're not even aware of how it's gonna make them feel after they get it, and then they feel like they were dissatisfied with the experience, right? So I think that piece for asking for help, like back to kind of the earlier part of where we were talking is naming the problem as it is to begin with is super important for any person to recognize that because that's your first step to be able to build out a plan and preparing yourself for all of the things. But people think that there are two options once something happens, right? The home or the home, right? That's where this person has to go. And sometimes that is the solution because that's the only place for them to go. But when you end up in an institution situation, which I think you guys ended up in with your mom, maybe a few times back and forth, right? And I mean, that takes a moment to get used to that type of living. And it's also not perfect, and there's a lot of things that come up in those environments too, and not being prepared for that or thinking that was an easy button. Okay, now my mom's here, she's safe, or hopefully their problem now. That wasn't true, right, for you? I mean, you were
No,
still
it wasn't. Yeah, it
right?
was definitely not when my mom would leave the hospital and get discharged, then do a month of rehab at a facility. Day 1 or day 2, she could say, "I don't wanna do this, I refuse," and they would say, "Okay," and discharge her and then send her back home. And then we would just have the fight of, "You shouldn't be at home because you're not well yet. I don't know what this means," and having to manage all those hoops to try to get her to stay there. I think the dynamic is if you're caring for a child, you're the parent, so you have the ultimate responsibility for that child, but the adult still has a voice and they can, against the better judgment of everybody around them, they can make a decision and we have to live with that decision.
Right, right.
And that made it really complicated. So, I've got a couple more questions for you. So, one of the themes that we talk about frequently on this show is clarity under pressure. Caregiving is creating a unique environment where every decision that you make is emotionally loaded. You're making healthcare, financial, family decisions, and you have to do all of that with incomplete information. How does this prolonged caregiving challenge that we have affect our decision making capacity, stress levels, and overall performance at work? I know you work with organizations already as part of your role today. How do you see that affecting companies?
Look, I think it's already affecting companies. They're just not naming it, right? So I think giving organizations kind of the language to use to talk about it is number one. But I think talking about it is ground zero of where you need to start, and like putting a name to the issue. I think prolonged caregiving, again, planning makes a tremendous amount of difference,
Hmm.
but that is not sexy. It is not something people like to do. It is one of those things on the to do list that isn't in crisis mode, so we don't do it. But the difference between a family that actually plans and thinks things through versus the one that's doing it at midnight in the emergency room is wildly different. And look, the outcomes in both situations, there's a chronic condition that somebody's dealing with. The home is no longer a safe environment, or there's brain change, or there's all of those things. But the folks who've like had the conversation early enough, even a 6-month runway before the crisis hit, are
Yeah.
exponentially better off than those who've waited. I mentioned it a minute ago about just getting your power of attorney documents in order, doing it when it's uncomfortable. You want to do it when it's just an uncomfortable conversation with the siblings and the parent that's still making the decisions versus when it's impossible. You had a similar situation with that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And just having certain documentations in place when a decision needs to be made makes that emergency moment a little bit easier. It does not take away from the painfulness of that moment. I want to be
Yeah.
clear,
Yeah.
but it's one less thing you have to navigate in that moment.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. I think when you're navigating a crisis and then you're also having to make a really difficult decision, your brain power is already diminished because you're in that reactive, anxious, stressful state. And then you have to make rational decisions. It's hard for your brain to manage that cognitive load.
right. Yeah, you're switching from a rational decision from an emotional monkey mindset, right? Like from that monkey brain, I am super worked up, super anxious. And you dealt with, I mean, Lisa, you were ping ponging back and forth. Like your brain must have just been like, I mean, like,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean,
I was context switching all day long. A very complicated conversation with the hospital. And then, oh, now I've got to have this strategy meeting at work. And then, oh, now I'm back to filling out paperwork for getting Medicare, Medicaid support.
right, right. And then maybe going to see your son's softball or baseball game or whatever it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
or something that you actually wanted to enjoy your time period doing. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
this,
because I always felt like during that period of time, especially when it got really acute, is I was never present because I was always thinking about what is the next thing? What's the next task that I have to get done? And I wasn't in the present moment because I was always thinking about all of the tasks that were stacked up in my brain.
yeah, yeah. And it's your family. And it definitely impacts the entire system, right? So your home life is impacted tremendously, your children, and
Mhm.
also, I'll just say for families that are raising kids and married or single parent and helping your parents, your kids are also watching you.
You're
They're
right.
watching you and how you're responding to your parents. And they're picking all of that up. I mean, everything that I do is for my daughters, and I want them to, at the end of, I do nothing else in my life, is that at the end of theirs, they say, my mom was the best mom, and I learned so much. And so I want to be able to be in a place and respond to stressful moments in a way that I want my daughters to take as a positive, like I'm going to do that too.
Mhm.
And
Well, I know for one thing this experience taught me, and I talked to my son about it, is I will make sure that everything is planned so that I will try to reduce the amount of stress that happens when I get old and you're having to navigate decisions like this.
I love that you just said that because that's exactly the gift that corporations can give to people today.
Mhm.
Because even though you might be the employee that's dealing with this moment in time, you also have your next moment in time with your adult children or your family too. So take the time now while you're healthy and well to have those conversations, get your documents in place, figure out the financing of how you're going to pay for things,
Yeah.
and like do that gift for your children because we are living longer, and the cost of care is not getting any less expensive.
Mhm.
Knowing how to do that long-term care insurance while you're healthy and you can get it, like, do it. I mean, it's smart, it's helpful. So,
Yeah.
yes.
So many organizations are investing in employee well-being, mental health programs, retention strategy, but based on our conversation, elder care seems to be it remains a little bit invisible. So if you were advising a CEO or a chief HR officer, what's the first step should they take to better support employees who are navigating these caregiving responsibilities?
The first step is absolutely ask the question and
So
start track.
what does that look like? What's the question sound like?
So I mean, I would send out a survey and say, "How many
Okay.
of you are dealing with" I have a tool that does this. I mean, you can do it in any variation, but are you caregiving? How many days a week are you caregiving? Do you know if there are caregiving benefits in your organization? Like, would you use them? Do you feel like whatever, I mean, those are just getting a basic rundown of
Uh-huh.
that.
Just
Ask,
to figure out how many people in your organization are already
get your
dealing
data,
with it.
right? The first
Yeah.
thing you want to do is get your data point because I guarantee you, if they're dealing with it, they know that at least their same cohort of folks, there's a, there's 53% of them that are likely dealing with it too. So
Mhm.
that would be the first thing I would say to any organization is go ask the questions and get the data, and then from that data, you can build out programs within your organization. I mean, they don't need they don't need another yoga app. The yoga app's great, but they are gonna probably need some mental health services like we talked about, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
they do need that part of recommending that in your Welly app or whatever your organization uses, making sure that whoever that person is at your EAP plan has, is that they have somebody experienced in elder care, right? I would look at the ones who offer legal services. Maybe there's a package that, everyone gets where they get the power of attorney package all figured out, right? Stuff like that. That's where you build in. That's where I think savvy people, but look, you can add all that. Like EAP programs, only 4% of organization uses EAP programs, and that's nationally. They're not utilized. So these programs only make sense if your leaders understand them and know when to deploy them. Like, right? So it's not bury your head in the sand. To our point earlier, like, these are conversations that need to be having. So just adding it to the benefits package without navigating somebody to it isn't going to help either.
Okay. So I think what you said is there's likely some sort of wellness app. So build this module. First, get the data, then start building into the programs. And then I think your last point was power of attorney. So there's probably some legal resources and just checking to see is this covered as part of that employee benefit? Because it sounds like it could be already in the EAP programs, but now we're just directing people towards, hey, did you know that these are available to you?
And making an effort within your organizational culture. to be sending that message out to your employees in a meaningful way, right? And doing a train the trainer with your leaders, like if your department heads or, it's not just HR. I mean, anyone who has leads a team needs to be able to know what's going on with their team, with their check-ins, and giving them tools to have those conversations too, so they can flag it and be like, "Hey, we have programs, we have stuff that can help with that."
All right, Jamie, for listeners who recognize themselves in this conversation, I really appreciate you just having this dialogue with me. I was vulnerable about my situation, but I'm doing that because I think we need to have more leaders stand up and talk about what's happening so that it becomes more normalized to have these conversations in corporations. Having this conversation for leaders who want to better support their people and their organization, where can they find more about the Health Project? Your specific organization, I know you operate out of Arizona, but where can they find more about you, your company,
Yeah,
things that
so
you do?
my LinkedIn page, there's a variety of different ways to contact me on LinkedIn. My website is, help, HELP hyphen project.com. You can also catch me there. Any of those places are easy to connect with me and have a conversation, book some time with me. There's a Calendly link. I'm really excited about these conversations because I think once you talk to organizations that understand this, they're really excited to help their employees too. So, I think there's a momentum and a movement here that recognizes exactly what you went through, Lisa. So,
Okay, thank you so much. So, if today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with somebody who might be navigating caregiving responsibilities or leading a team where these challenges might be quietly unfolding. The strongest organizations aren't built by ignoring the reality. They're built by understanding what their people are carrying and creating environments where they can perform, contribute, and thrive. Thank you for joining us for Fitness Friday. Until next time, stay curious, stay present, and keep building clarity under pressure.